couple of years ago, What Culture released 10 horror films too scary to finish, and some viewers got very, very upset about it. These aren't even scary, everyone cried. These are just the most classic, well-loved horror movies, nothing more. Now, the counter to this would be to point out that they're classics for a reason, because traditionally horror films are meant to be scary. But instead of dwelling on that, we're just going to take a different approach. Having trawled through buckets of comments, tweets, and Reddit posts, this updated list now includes films that the previously unimpressed horror junkies actually recommended themselves. So without further ado, I'm Amy from What Culture, and here are 10 more horror films too scary to finish. 10. NOROI the Curse. Starting off strong, this film follows a paranormal researcher who gets swept up in a flurry of disappearances whilst working on his newest documentary. His film, The Curse, started with a visit to an empty home that the neighbours reported as being the source of some mysterious crying noises. As soon as the investigation gets off the ground, however, the neighbours who brought the investigator along are mysteriously killed, just the first few in what will become a pattern of very suspicious deaths. There's a complex web of characters and stories to get through, each more upsetting than the last. With failed rituals, horrible secrets, and a powerful demon, there's plenty of scares being generated at any given time. One critic even compared it to seeing a whole season of The X-Files condensed down into 2 unsettling hours, which is high praise indeed for its terrifying atmosphere and great storytelling. 9. Funny Games. Both the original and the remake of this film have stood the test of time, with the funny games concept still making people grossly uncomfortable even over 20 years since its first release. If you're a fan of The Strangers and other vicious, unmotivated home invasion horrors, then this is right up your alley. And also, maybe see a therapist. It tells the story of a family trapped in their home by 2 sadistic strangers who make themselves comfortable whilst playing some torturous games with the residents. At all times, the tension is so thick you can feel it through the screen, and when the assailants occasionally break the 4th wall to interact with you, the viewer, you begin to feel a little bit guilty that you're watching and you're complicit in their crimes. Good horror doesn't need spooky ghosts or ancient burial grounds to be scary, and the terror factor in this film comes from the unpredictability of the intruder's next actions, and also the knowledge that a happy ending is definitely out of the question. It was a film made to make you feel uncomfortable and bad for watching it, so the fact that some people couldn't make it to the end kind of proves how well it works. 8. SINISTER. This is another film which, in a certain way, benefits from the found footage gimmick. For those of you that haven't seen it, SINISTER isn't all in the style of found footage. However, there is one vital element of the film which involves, well, finding some footage. The bit in question here is when our protagonist Ellison finds a bunch of snuff films in his new family home's attic. Knowingly moving into a house that murders have taken place in is one thing, but then staying in that house when you find a box full of disgusting videos of murders on the premises is another. We're unfortunate enough to get a viewing of some of these tapes, in which we see a number of families meet their untimely ends by burning, drowning, and a whole load of other terrible, terrible things. Yeah, I mean, don't worry about moving out. Here seems just great, really safe. The film overall certainly isn't flawless, but for a lot of people, the tapes and their accompanying soundtrack made for some very uncomfortable viewing. The tension of seeing the family going about their business in the house, just as we know something terrible is imminently going to happen, is sometimes too much to bear. 7. The Babadook. So this one could prove to be very controversial, because for every one person who says this film was literally the scariest thing they've ever seen, there's always one other person to counter that by saying it barely even made them flinch. Jennifer Kent's critically acclaimed horror swept through horror fans with a frantic wave of intrigue, telling the chilling story of a widowed single mother and her troubled young son. The mother, Amelia, one night reads a story to her son Sam before bed, but the book she's reading from, she doesn't remember buying. From then on, the two are haunted by a mysterious monster called the Babadook. Its appearance and voice will send a shiver down the spine of most viewers, and aside from being a genuinely terrifying, really well-made film, it has an important deeper meaning. Basically, if you're going to try and insist that there's not a single please make it stop moment in the whole thing, then maybe you should try getting outside a bit more. 6. The Borderlands 2013. Stepping away from the bigger names, now we have this British found footage flick. It revolves around 3 men sent by the Vatican to investigate an old church after reports of supernatural occurrences happening within its walls. Following the suicide of a local priest, things only get worse as the locals begin to shun the Vatican group. It's a classic religious horror with a culty, witchy twist, and the sights of a small-town 13th century church are a bit too familiar for some of us Brits, making some parts of it feel very close to home. It hits on all the right marks, giving us a creepy church, nighttime forest traipsing, a dark secret harboured by a quiet town, you know, all those classics. If you do manage to get through all that without a problem though, just you wait till the ending. Now, I love a good twist as much as the next guy, but I really wasn't ready for that. 5. GONJIAM Haunted Asylum. There are a lot of great, really terrifying South Korean horror movies out there, and one that frequently appeared in discussions online was this. The film starts as 2 teenage boys go missing in an abandoned psychiatric hospital. Yeah, I know it's kind of a weak start, but trust me, it gets better. Following this, a team of YouTube's finest supernatural investigators decide to go looking for them. I'll say this much, the sound of a ping pong ball bouncing has never made me jump that hard, and it will get you too. Now, we all know that found footage horror can be a really mixed bag, but this film does make the style work, with wobbling close-ups of the investigators' terrified faces interspersed amongst the dark and mysterious wide shots. As is the norm with these asylum-based supernatural horrors, there are a few jump scares. However, the film isn't riddled with them to the point of annoyance. It's easy to see why some may struggle to reach the end of this one, as the feeling of impending doom definitely starts to weigh on you. 4. Dead Silence 2007. Can we all just agree that ventriloquist dummies, quite frankly, were a mistake and never should have been invented? They're horrible to look at, a weird thing to use as decoration, and they're also the perfect vessels for a haunting. Just burn them. Just burn them all. No normal, well-adjusted person has ever developed an interest in these things, and so for most people, receiving one of these bad boys in the mail would be a huge red flag. Protagonist Jamie and his wife, however, don't immediately burn the thing for some reason, and they have to face the consequences for that. Haunted by the spirit of a murdered ventriloquist, the dummy Billy brings death and misfortune to all those around him. In order to best demonstrate the sheer horror this film offers, it is best to spoil it a little bit. I won't show you anything, but just hear these words. Human marionette puppets. Need I say more? It's like Criminal Minds meets Supernatural meets your worst nightmare, the movie. And it's no wonder some people could barely make it to the end with the frequency at which your fight or flight response will be triggered. But for those that did make it to the ending twist, at least you got a good reward, I guess. 3. Suspiria 1977. Suspiria is another one of those rare instances of older films that weren't ruined by the remake, but for this entry we are going to focus on the original. Dario Argento's masterpiece boasts on some promotional material that the only thing more terrifying than the last 12 minutes of this film is the first 92, promising viewers an unrelentingly horrid experience throughout. In its acclaimed opening sequence, we see a girl running screaming from the film's central dance academy, only to be brutally murdered along with her friend in spite of all their attempts to flee. It does set the tone for the film immediately, and it's a sure thing that there are people out there who just couldn't bear it and did the best thing for them, which was to dip out immediately. The movie itself is unrelenting in its scare factor, both in regards to suspense and more overt visual horror. Sometimes witch movies can be too campy or just kind of uninspired, but Argento didn't let us down on this one, so the least we can do is try to watch it to the end. 2. Evil Dead 2013. Fede Alvarez's Evil Dead reboot has got a lot of good feedback over the years, with people praising it for its tense atmosphere and hair-raisingly gory violence. When a group of friends head to a cabin in the woods to help one of them recover from a heroin addiction, a set of events so horrible unfold that they probably wish it all was just a bad drug trip. After reading aloud an incantation from an old spooky-looking book, an ancient evil is unleashed that rains terror down upon the friends. Along with the obvious appeal of demons and possessions, this film has plenty of body horror to get the juices flowing, which was definitely the wrong phrase to use here. Even for the more moderate gore fans, bits of this film can be a struggle to power through, making it no surprise there's some people out there who thought this remake was far too scary to finish. 1. Event Horizon. There's no way we could get through this list without at least one space-based horror, and Paul W.S. Anderson is here to deliver. Despite being a veritable failure on its first release, release. Over the years, Event Horizon has gained quite a cult following, with plenty of viewers claiming it as one of the scariest films they'd ever watched. It all starts with a distress signal from the titular ship, much to the surprise of the receivers because the aforementioned vessel disappeared 7 years prior without a trace. On arriving at the Event Horizon, members of the rescue crew find the place in tatters, with evidence of an apparent massacre. The descent into madness starts as one crew member, Justin, is accidentally sucked into a black hole, emerging catatonic and absolutely traumatized by whatever he saw on the other side. I know there's curiosity and everything, but maybe we would just be better off not knowing what he saw. If the various hallucinations don't turn your stomach, then the captain's log just might. It's safe to say that this isn't the future we wanted from space travel. And that brings us to the end of this list of 10 more horror films too scary to finish. I want to know what the absolute scariest film you've ever seen is, and did you have to turn it off? Let us know in the comments below. And in the meantime, remember to check out whatculture.com for more lists and articles like this every single day. I've been Amy from What Culture, and I'll catch you next time.